So good evening, everybody. Welcome to episode 4 of 4. Yes, for the observant of you, the last one. Standards check Thursday. It's the last one in this series. We've got terrific response to the boys here at Smart Driving. So I'm sure we'll be doing them again in the future. And they have been recorded, and lots of other stuff has been recorded. And for the people, the 30 people that email me every day, check my YouTube channel, right? Go to YouTube, type in David Poole Marketing, David Poole Driving School Marketing, or just get an email from me and you'll find a ton of videos on there. So yeah, tonight, Standards Check Thursday with Graham Lucas and John Farlam. Gentlemen, what I'm going to do is I'm going to mute myself. I'll stay online. And if anybody has got any questions on Zoom, so if you've registered, we'll get to those questions first, and please put them in the chat box. Don't put them in the Q&A box. The reason is this: if my internet connection dies, Graham and John cannot see the questions. If you put them in the chat box, they can see the questions. For those of you that are watching on Facebook Land, good evening, everybody. Please like, share, and comment, because the more ADIs and PDIs we can get the message out to, then a stronger profession we will have. That's my belief anyway. So I'm going to mute myself. I'm going to pass you over to the very experienced Graham Lucas and John Farlam. No, I'm not. Sorry, no, I'm not. Good gracious, I've forgotten something. How can I forget this?
Info, I think.
Yeah, we do this for the Driving Instructors Business Summit, and we're raising money for the Speed of Sight. It's on January the 28th. 165 people are coming so far. 165. It's huge. So you want to be there as well. I've got loads of stuff to tell you about that, but we'll do that when we finish tonight.
Have I run out of tickets? I've got half a dozen people who want some.
You've probably only got about half a dozen tickets left. So we'll message you after that.
They've all gone now, then I will.
All right, yeah. Your free one's ready for Smart Driving anyway. John and Graham and Adam put their hand in the pocket for 50 tickets if you're a member of Smart Driving. So yeah, I think there's 6 or 7 left. Everybody else has to pay. There we go. AD Indy, Tina and Kelly down at AD Indy, they are supplying the webinar technology, so we can do this, have this little 3-way when Adam's here. 4-way, I know, sounds bad, doesn't it? There we go. So thank you very much to them. See you at the summit. I am now going to shut up, and I'll be back around about 5 past the hour. Graham, John, you're on.
Just before we kick off, Graham, I love the comment from Denise about the sat-nav today. For those on Facebook, I've had a fantastic day today using the sat-nav with my pupils. Apart from them learning how to use it, we've toured with the different voices. The Australian James is hilarious. Now, I think that is brilliant. I think that is brilliant because if you're not having fun, if you're not having a bit of a laugh, what a great way to start attaching good feelings to learning and get the old endorphins going and stuff in the brain, all the feel-good factor stuff. I love it. There used to be a lot of laughing in my car, and I think I would have loved to. In fact, I think I might start going back and just to do the playing with the sat-nav lessons.
Did I read somewhere talking about sat-navs that students, clients are more have more faith in their mobile phone systems than they do sat-navs? Yeah, beginning to think sat-navs are old-fashioned.
I wrote it yesterday, I think.
You wrote it yesterday, yeah. Oh, yes, you did. Therefore, I read your news, John.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's. I will. I fear that some instructors still aren't really getting into the whole concept of the sat-nav and the route planning lesson, and the fact that, you know, the whole thing about how to use it, where to use it, when to use it. And I'm going to do an update in a couple of weeks on my sat-nav info. And we might have a webinar in the new year about it as well. Yeah. But, okay. But anyway, Graham, good evening, everybody.
Good evening, everybody. We're on the second half of teaching and learning strategies. We did the first 4 examiner questions last week with was the teaching style suited? Was the pupil encouraged? Were opportunities and example used? And was the technical information given comprehensive, appropriate and accurate? Now, the first question cropping up today, was the pupil given appropriate and timely feedback during the session? I can actually give an example of that. I've been doing some standards check training today. A couple of people have travelled down an awful long way from the northeast of England to do some standards check training with smart driving. And one of the things in a little bit of role play, we didn't do a lot of role play, in a little bit of role play, I actually came into a roundabout much too quickly and nothing was said or mentioned at all. So we stopped and we talked about timely feedback and appropriate feedback. And I can also give another example of that. We're on dual carriageway with a blue light coming. And I was given a lot of instruction how to deal with this blue light and then nothing afterwards. So we actually stopped in a car park and had a chat about the feedback about the blue light. Have you anything to add on that sort of thing, John?
Well, no, the first thing, again, a bit of housekeeping. I keep forgetting things. Graham mentions that I seem to look around a lot, and just for anybody watching, I've got 3 screens here, which obviously you can't see. So I'm just kind of checking things to make sure I'm keeping up with everything. I'm Googling the answers as well.
Oh dear.
Right, so feedback.
Timely and appropriate.
Yeah, this is specific. It also says throughout the lesson. So first of all, I think we need to address what do we mean by feedback. And I think feedback is any information that can help people recognize what they're doing, what they've done. Now, you might think, well, it's bloody obvious. Whether it's good, bad, or otherwise, I'll choose a bad example because it's the only example I know, actually. But let's say cutting a right-hand corner. It's obvious if somebody's cut a right-hand corner. They obviously know they've done it. No, they don't. And perhaps more pertinent is the opposite when people are doing things well. It's, well, obviously he didn't stall today. Well, he's not aware of that. You know, if you say to a learner, so how do you think it went today? The norm, now whether this is, I've not worked a lot with people outside the UK. I mean, I've worked with people who've not been UK nationals today, but I've mostly worked with people from within our culture. So whether it's a norm in British culture or in the culture of people that live and grow up in Britain, even though their ethnicity might be from elsewhere, the norm seems to be if somebody how they got on, they'll start by listing all the bad stuff and all the stuff they got wrong. And often it's because they haven't had enough feedback about the good stuff. Yeah. And there's a simple question I often asked in my masterclass courses about this. And I asked people, how many times do you pull up on the left during the average driving lesson? Or on the right now, of course, if you weren't already doing so before. How many times do you pull up on the average driving lesson? Now, you pull up at the end of the lesson. So that's one reason for pulling up. You pull up before you attempt a manoeuvre, often. So that's another reason for pulling up. You'll occasionally pull up and move off. And I say occasionally because it's one of the things I feel instructors don't do nearly enough, at least the instructors I tend to work with. They'll practice just to pull up and move off again. And we're sort of running out of reasons to pull up now. Oh, you pull up when you're going to explain a new subject. That's another reason that you pull up on the left. And of course, the other reason you pull up is after somebody's got something wrong. So my next question to people, okay, we've now got, what was it, 5 reasons that I count there for pulling up. Which one is the most frequent? Well, when people get things wrong. Because you pull up for that 2, 3, 4 times in a lesson. Whereas, for example, you only pull up once at the end of the lesson. You only maybe cover one new thing and pull up for it. So for maybe 5 times in a lesson for some people, you pull up to tell them they've got something wrong. So then I ask the question, so let's think about the scales. Let's think about the balance. How many times you pull up purely for no other reason than to discuss something that they've got right and that they've done well. And I won't say that instructors don't do it. I'm sure some of the people that are listening here tonight, that are joining in here tonight, do it, but it's not the norm, not in my experience. And though I say it myself, my experience is fairly considerable. So this thing about feedback. Feedback is about helping people recognize their behavior so that they can build on the good stuff and learn from the not so good stuff. Any thoughts on that, Graham?
Yeah, I can actually give an example today. One of the people that came to me today had a standards check and just scraped into a grade A, and he wanted to improve. He wanted to see what was going wrong. And he said that he was on a dual carriageway, and they came off a dual carriageway and went into a village and wanted to turn left. About 20 minutes into his standards check, he was taking a learner that just failed a test on manoeuvres with poor observation and things. And he said, and the learner was a bit wide on a turn left corner. And I happened to say to the learner, "You're a bit wide there." And that was the end of the feedback. And my reaction to that was, how will the examiner know whether that learner could do that? They didn't bother going and doing another left corner or anything. They just went back on the dual carriageway.
Either way, just to butt in for a second there anyway, Graham, that's not feedback, that's just criticism.
No, well, it was the end of the feedback in the sense that the examiner got the impression that the learner couldn't do left turns properly because there was no history given at the start, and there was no... I
understand, but even from the learner's point of view, and even if the learner could do left turns properly, you've gone a bit wide there, there's got to be a reason. I mean, even if that were phrased as a question, any idea why you went a bit wide there?
Well,
and look, whether there's a surprised look on the face or not will tell you whether they recognise they've gone a little bit wide.
Yeah, well, we actually went and did a bit of a left, a bit wide on a left approach, left turn from a major to a minor. And it was sort of pulled up and discussed it. And it was the first question that came along was, how did you feel about that last junction? Yeah, and we discussed the MSPSL routine and what was good and what could have been done better. And we brought scaling in again, of course.
It's interesting. We talked about questions and Q&A before, and I said that's something you can never really stop learning about. But just although it's a pretty hackneyed question, and it's, in some respects, it's a bit overused, but it's a fantastic. How do you feel about it? It's a fantastic question, because there's never a don't know answer. Nobody doesn't know how they feel. We all know, unless we've got very extreme psychopathic tendencies, we all know how and even we're probably aware of how we feel. We all know how we feel all the time. Whether we want to, the degree to which we want to share that is another thing. But if you ask somebody, how do you feel about that? Well, I don't know. Well, I'd love to be able to tell you how you feel, but that's not one that I can answer. So let's work with that one a little bit more, find out where you're coming from, then we'll find out where I'm coming from. Yeah, because only the learner can answer that question. If you say, how did you do back there? Oh, I don't know, you tell me. That's a legitimate response. Yeah. Which you've then got to pile in on again. Yeah, well, I can tell you, but how do you think you did it? And but how do you feel? One goes straight in from the jugular.
Yeah, and this guy had the feedback from the examiner said he should have followed it up and so on. And his reaction was, well, the learner knew how to do it already. And my reaction was, well, did the examiner know the learner knew? And the possible answer to that was, well, maybe not.
Yeah. and my response would also be, I mean, we all make mistakes. I've stalled a car. I've occasionally overloaded my trailer. I've done one or two. We do things that either accidentally or we take a little bit of a risk that we shouldn't take. It's called being human, and it's called being drivers. So maybe the learner can do it. But if you're tasked with the job of preparing that learner for a driving test, safe driving, even one-off mistakes need to be verified as such. So if that learner's gone wide a bit, you went a bit wide there. First of all, if he already knows how to do it, that shouldn't need to be spoken. He shouldn't need that feedback. That feedback should be unnecessary. It should be straight in with, what can you tell me about?
Well, that comes down to the appropriate bit, doesn't it?
Yeah. But if it is necessary to say you went a bit wide there, we need a little bit more follow-up. As I say, that in itself isn't feedback, that's just criticism. And criticism, I suppose, is a form of feedback. But we need to dig a little bit deeper there. We distracted, what was going on the approach, where were you looking, what were you thinking, what led up to that, what's going on in your mind, how it's likely to affect you after you pass your test, on your driving test, all that. Sometimes you learn to just say, just shut up, I made a mistake.
Yeah.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
You've got a result, you've got something sorted. But a little bit more than criticism, you know.
Yeah, and I guess the feedback appropriate would be, and timely would be, dependent on the level of skill of the pupil as well. If you've got a full license holder versus somebody on their third lesson, as an example, taking the two extremes.
What can you tell me about positioning?
Yeah.
Generally.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And that will often, with someone in that position, in that situation, a more experienced learner or whatever, the response you'll often get, particularly a more mature, I mean mature in terms of emotionally mature rather than age, a more mature person with more mature learner will often respond then with, I was a bit wide on that corner, wasn't I? I'm not normally, I did this, I did that, and they'll tell you all about it. And then that becomes feedback, because the other thing about feedback, I'm not sure how DVSA look at this, but the other thing about feedback is self-evaluation is feedback. Well, sometimes learners can give themselves feedback. You mentioned scaling earlier, Graham. Often, I don't know if you've experienced this, but I've experienced this in ADI training, in my masterclass training, with learners, with high-speed drivers, with all sorts of different things I've taught. They've started going through a process of discussion, and then they've suddenly looked surprised when they've heard something that they've said themselves, almost sort of thinking out loud. And the first time they hear the solution, the answer, is when they verbalise it. And that becomes sort of self-feedback then as well, raising self-awareness.
Yeah, I noticed there's a couple of questions, because I've been talking about this left turn, and one from Elaine saying me, do you think you're in the correct position to turn? That requires a yes or no answer, I think, and it's more about the feeling of the pupil from my point of view. In this particular instance, it was a learner that had failed the test and they were doing dual carriageways, and the appropriateness would have been some feedback, go and sort that back out, and then get back on the lesson plan again.
It's a good question, Elaine. I mean, do you think you're in the correct position to turn? Particularly if the car's on the move, it's a nice closed down question. It, like Graham said, it needs a yes or no. But I'm not sure that it takes us very far. What can you tell me about the turn can make you decide whether the next thing you're going to say is just pull up on the left, or, oh, that's fine, and whether it can be dealt with on the move. Interestingly enough, that this thing, I'm not, closed questions can be very valuable on the move. Sometimes 2 or 3 quick yes/no questions can get you the information you need without being a distraction to the learner. Often, when you talk to people about Q&A, I've been on courses, I've actually sat in classrooms where the trainer's been at the front and almost saying, well, you shouldn't use closed questions. They're not good questions to ask. I know this one isn't about Q&A, it's about feedback, but it's all part of the same process. Closed questions are absolutely fantastic, and they're absolutely essential sometimes, particularly sometimes there was somebody on I think it was the first Standards Check webinar we did, Graham, 4 or 5 weeks ago, and somebody came on, and I've forgotten, if you're here tonight, I'm sorry, I've forgotten who you were, I've forgotten your name, but he said 95% of my learners don't answer the questions. And I was a bit brutal, a bit glib, saying, well, you're not really asking the questions properly, very good questions. And yes, I am. Well, no, you're not, because that's not the norm. But it could be that if you're getting a lot of people that aren't asking the questions, some people are very reluctant to answer questions. If you stab them with 2 or 3 closed questions, or even questions that are unrelated, like, oh, it's a wet day today, isn't it? Daft as it seems, answering a yes to that question starts to ease them in to being comfortable answering questions. And often closed questions, and when you're giving feedback, when you're trying to elicit feedback from somebody, sometimes closed questions can be very useful for people who are a little bit reluctant to contribute. It can get them to start to answer, to start to get into that I'm in answering questions mode, so that when you throw something a bit deeper, they're already starting to think about giving an answer.
Yeah, I do apologise, Elaine. I was a little bit blunt, and John stepped in and said, "Oh, close question."
Graham's always a bit blunt.
Much more subtle than I am. For me, close questions can start a conversation.
Yeah.
They can, So, did you notice? Have you seen the red light? Yeah. Have you seen the pedestrian crossing?
And interesting, this has become a Q&A webinar, but
yeah, I don't mean
interesting. Have you seen the red light's a great one. Often the answer to the question will come in an action. And if there's a sudden stop of the brake pedal, you know the answer was no. And if there's just a gentle covering up and looking at the mirror and braking gently and a little bit more progressively, the answer is no, but I can cope. Yeah,
okay.
So feedback, let me just read that again for myself. Was the pupil given appropriate? Yeah. I'm sorry, I've just got a pet hate that's just popped into my mind about this whole Standards Check form. I'm going off at a tangent here. I know that's unlike me. But I'm going off at a tangent. Have you noticed that all these questions go, was the pupil? And I think the term pupil is very hierarchical. I think it sort of goes in teacher, pupil, It almost puts a teacher on a high level. For me, that's not very client-centered. And I'm surprised that the DVSA, the guy that did a lot of work on this, I know wasn't keen on that, but he's not at the DVSA anymore. Very, very clever guy. But,
when you take this sheet as a whole, though, John, it's pretty good. I mean, it's all it's all joined up writing. So
no, I love it.
It is.
I love it. I love it much more than the old approach. Yeah. So there was a pupil given appropriate and timely feedback. Timely feedback is important. We've not touched on timely feedback.
Can I give just a quick example of that, John? Today, when I was driving, I became a fleet driver just for a little bit of role play. We didn't do an awful lot of role play, but I did a little bit of role play, and we were driving along Baton Road, this busy industrial estate, and there was a lorry reversing and a forklift truck trying to get stuff off another lorry on the opposite side of the road, a van trying to overtake, and I got fired about 7 or 8 questions, one after another, while all this was going on. Rather than in terms of the timing of all this, it became a sort of shut up, let me concentrate on what's going on ahead. Had I been a learner, I think I might have been a little bit screwed up with it all.
Absolutely. So the timely thing. Generally, the rule is as soon as practically possible, because the longer you leave the feedback, we've got to remember that even on good routes, with well-pitched lessons, with well-focused goals and things, if you're challenging your learners, particularly those that want to push ahead, there's a lot going on in the learner's head. They're like the swan going upstream, paddling like hell under the water, looking serene on the surface. They're doing a lot more of that than you are. Well, at least that should be the way it works. And sometimes if you start dumping feedback onto people when they're busy doing other things, two things. One, it becomes a distraction, and two, it doesn't sink in. It will just, it'll go right past them. So as soon as practically possible, and if it's complex, pull up, unless the learner is very good standard tester. But it's down to each individual learner. What can this learner comprehend on move without distraction? But as soon as practically possible.
It's quite funny, isn't it? Because it links very strongly with the lesson plan adapted when appropriate to help the pupil work towards their learning goals. So if something's gone wrong, then maybe that adaptation and that question we just asked about appropriate and timely feedback link strongly together in all sorts of ways. The next question on all of this is were the pupils' queries followed up and answered?
Just before that one, Graham, I just want to catch up with one or two of these things in the question in the chat box, so we're not stacked up with a load of stuff at the end. And again, to demonstrate the thing about appropriate feedback, if I leave it too long, the moment's gone, and the person that's asked the thing has moved on. And so the more I can kind of keep on top and give feedback on things. Not always as they come in, because we're chatting away and we want to keep the thing on track to the topic. But Marie, is there any particular reason? That's a closing question. The other concept about open and closed questions, there aren't any strictly closed questions. Well, there are some strictly closed questions or strictly open questions. There's a lot of grey in between. And a question like, is there any particular reason? Is there any particular reason? And that could be a yes or no, or it could elicit a particular reason. So it's what I call a closing question. It's somewhere in the middle of open and closed. But I thought closed questions are essential for seeking confirmation. Yes and no. If you're not getting confirmation any other way, remember, answers to questions don't only come with words. You get confirmation in body language. You know what I mean? I mean, yes. No, I mean, no.
Yeah, the other thing about that sort of stuff, though, is if you ask the question, is this a good position? And the pupil realise it's not a good position and just moves, then they've answered the question, but they have no idea why.
You've also got to be a bit careful with closed questions on their own for seeking confirmation. If you're busy looking out the windscreen and not watching learner, you're not really getting confirmation, because the words are sometimes with some learners, and you'll get to recognise them, and I'm sure you do recognise them, but the words will sometimes be what the learner thinks the instructor wants to hear. So that's negative. That's false confirmation, false news, or whatever Trump would call it. Fake news, fake confirmation.
Fake news, yeah. Fake news.
Graham, sorry. So the next.
I'm just wary. We spent 30 minutes talking about one question. That was all.
Yeah, I know. I'm figuring that. I'm figuring. Oh no, I was looking at the others. I was thinking.
Yeah. I bet all panelists had better start ordering takeaways, I think.
Okay. So were the pupils, were the learners, were the pupils' queries followed up and answered?
You know, I'd love another word on that. Fully, yeah.
Well, at all, yeah. I mean, yeah. It's not, the question's not really finished, is it?
Yeah. No, not at all.
I mean, were the pupils' queries followed? I could string that one out for assessment purposes. I mean, timely would come in there as well. Were the pupils' queries followed up and answered at an appropriate point, in good time? Were they answered at all? Were they answered fully? Pupils' queries. Now, that's also an interesting one there. How often do you answer non-verbal questions? Learners ask lots of non-verbal questions, but you will only know about them if you're watching the learner closely. That means probably in a lot of, well, if we take a balance of everything right down from fast motorways to busy stop-start traffic in a town centre, I would say you want to be watching the learner 60% of the time. In some situations, you want to be watching the learner 90% of the time. You know, an average of about 60 to even 70% of your attention should be inside the car.
Claire, we're not staying till midnight.
And so non-verbal questions, examiner has nothing better to do in the back than sit noticing whether the learner's going.
Yeah, white knuckles on the steering wheel, sitting forward.
Really asking questions. And it's a great, it's a cliche that's coming to sports commentating now. They're really asking a question of the other team now. You know, but learners do it all the time. As soon as a learner starts exhibiting certain behaviours, they are asking a question. They might not be aware of it themselves, but it's something that needs addressing. To your point of view, it's something that needs an answer.
I have a little bit of an amusing true story. Many years ago on a part 3, I sat in the back, and the young lady that was taking her part 3, after about 10 minutes, started crying. And then her left foot on the clutch started shaking. And the examiner, Bernard his name was, he was absolutely brilliant about it. He said, would you like to pull up on the left-hand side? So she pulled up, and he said to her, have you got a tissue? She was literally crying. And he said, what's the matter? And she said, oh, I'm really nervous, you know, I really want this job and all the rest of it. I want to pass and so on. And he said to her, it was part 2, not part 3, sorry. He said, look, you know, it's just a simple drive. You know, if you want to go back, then we can stop and we can turn around and go back to the test centre. Or if you want to take a couple of minutes, that's fine as well, to compose yourself. And she took a couple of minutes and she went on and passed with a couple of minors. It was a second test. On the first test, she actually reversed into the crash barrier at the test centre on a Bay Park. So she was a complete wreck. But I sat in the back thinking, I'm going to have to say something in a minute. We're going to have to stop, you know. But the examiner noticed it, and he was very good about it. So there we go. Some positive news about the DVSA.
I almost sense, I've not gone through the comments, scroll down for the time being, but I can almost sense that somebody somewhere will be thinking, well, my learners don't tend to ask questions.
Yeah.
And if that is the case, whether it's somebody on this webinar or whether it's somebody out there in the big wide world, if that is the case, you need to be really questioning how much you're engaging the learner, what the rapport's like between you, and how much involvement you're seeking from them. Because when you ask them questions, when you seek involvement, they will naturally ask questions, because questions are part of normal conversation. In fact, questions, I think I talked about this when we were talking about Q&A. Questions are just about the very first, after monosyllables, questions are the first sentence structures that babies learn, that children learn. They start because it's a prime verbal way of making sense of the world. And once they've got past the monosyllable words and they're stringing a couple of words together, when they start stringing sentences together, it's a high percentage of questions, learning to ask questions. Question might just be 2 words, but it's a question. And so people ask questions, and it's your job to answer them. What if you don't know the answer? What if you don't know the answer?
Tell the truth and say, I don't know the answer. Let's work it out together. or let's go and find out.
Yeah, everybody else is stopping, so it must mean stop.
Yeah, I can give you my granddaughter, if she asks me why once more, I will give her why.
Yeah.
No, but, she's go and put your clothes away. Why? Yeah, because I said so. Oh, Nanny will have to do it. Yeah.
Now, there is one other thing. I talked about timing. I talked about questions that have been asked, answered when they're asked. But sometimes, and you need to write it down or something so you don't forget it, sometimes it's not appropriate to answer a question here and now. Some people have got, and it's the way they function, and it works for them, and it works well to a degree. But if you get too client-centered with them, they're like butterflies. They'll be going here, there, and everywhere. And if you're not careful, they end up with just a big mishmash, despite themselves. And it's because they've never organised their own thing. Now, some people work that way. They need that information. There are no blanket rules here. But sometimes somebody will come up with a question. You'll have to say, great question, really important, but is that relevant? And I can give you a very, very true example of an instructor who was trying to impress me with Q&A once. I was in the back of the car and he was in the front with a pupil. And he said, now, what's the speed limit on this? And the pupil said 30 miles an hour. And he said, so why do you think there's a 30 miles? How do you know there's a 30 miles an hour speed limit on this road? And the pupil said, oh, there's lampposts. And he said, well, why do you think they have a 30 miles an hour speed limit on this road? And the pupil goes, oh, well, is it because there's lots of traffic and things like that and people about? And the instructor went quiet for a minute and he said, and what would you do if you broke down at a railway level crossing? Yeah. Totally, a question totally unrelated. And all he was doing was asking questions that he could remember to show me that he could do Q&A. Now, learners are sometimes the same. They sometimes drift and ask what could be quite irrelevant questions, but it's important to remember that no question is irrelevant, but sometimes there's a time and a place. That's why I say never forget a question. Write it down if you're not going to answer it in the here and now. If you're not going to answer it this moment, make sure you're going to answer it in 5 minutes, or make sure you're going to say, right, that's a great question. I'm going to write it down here. One of the things we're going to do later is this, and we'll look at that then. In fact, we've done that on these webinars. We've said, in fact, no, it was last week somebody asked somebody, and I didn't say we'll deal with it well, but I said, I'm not going to deal with it now. Go back and look at the recording for the first webinar and you'll find the answer there. So there are lots of different ways of dealing with questions, and it isn't, if it means taking you really off track or taking the lesson off track, sometimes that might be a great idea, but you have to make a judgment call sometimes on those things.
Yeah, I think we ought to move on a little bit, John.
Yes.
41 minutes already. The next bit is did the trainer maintain an appropriate non-discriminatory manner throughout the session? I think this applies to the pupil as well, John, doesn't it, really?
Well, first of all, there are a couple of things here.
Women drivers.
There are two. When we say apply to pupil as well, yes, but let's just think about what discriminatory means first. I think I would do, now I've not got, I should be really Googling the dictionary definition at this point, but I think a dictionary definition is something like, I'm going to just do a dictionary definition of Google while you just talk about that, Graham.
If I tell you once, I've told you 1,000 times, would that be discriminatory, do you think? Yeah, and I've heard that said many a time by examiners, by instructors.
Yeah. I think it discriminates against the learner's ability to teach. The unjust or prejudicial treatment of different categories of people, especially on the grounds of race, age, or sex or gender. I think that perhaps means that.
Or skill.
Yeah, it can be anything, or skill level, or sometimes, and I'm going to start with a story. Sometimes you think that you're having a laugh and a giggle. And you think you're building rapport, and you did nearly 40 years ago when you're driving down North End Road in Fulham, which I think is a pedestrian street now. It was a market, maybe still a market, I don't know, but you used to be able to drive down there. And to pass the time of day, because you're not a very good instructor, I'm not going to mention who this instructor was, by the way, but to pass the time of day, because you're not a very good instructor, you say something like, well, just look at that woman on the footpath. Now, this woman on the footpath, I don't remember, but if you could imagine lime green shoes with pink and purple polka dot trousers and a yellow hat and an orange top or something like that, it's absolutely bizarre. And when the instructor says, casually passes the time of day by saying, oh, you'd think that person would invest in a mirror rather than spending all that money on clothes. And the learner goes, that's my mother. She didn't have any more lessons with me. I thought I was having a laugh and a joke. So crass and so stupid now when I look back at it. But at that point in my emotional development, I thought I was having a laugh and a joke at the expense of this person on the footpath who couldn't hear us, didn't know anything. So it was at nobody's expense, really. It was an innocent, pass the time of day, bit of conversational banter, utter stupidity,
And did you get away with it, John?
The discrimination of the road. Oh, look at that idiot. Don't take notice of that stupid person behind.
And I'm going to ask Claire a question, John. I'm sorry to butt in. She's put down to assume all that taxi drivers are something. What's wrong with that, Claire?
So if I'm well, first of all, we've got to come back to safe standards for life. Get a life, John. Don't stop being so bloody serious. Sorry, I've got to be serious because kids are out there killing themselves in cars, and just comments like, look at that old toss, when somebody like me stalls in front of them or something like that. It's grossly discriminatory, even though the old tosser's probably not going to hear unless you toot the horn. But what it's doing is teaching the learner that it's okay to be discriminatory towards other road users. So that's one form of discrimination. Yeah, discrimination and legitimising the fact that it's okay to have negative views about other people.
Can you remember when we were doing the standard checks videos, John? There was a set of traffic lights were approaching, and some younger man in a souped-up Volkswagen Golf came racing by us, sped in front of the traffic and turned right. And I think Adam was driving and I was doing, and Adam made some comment, and I said, well, you never know why he's doing that. Maybe the child could be being rushed into hospital or something like that.
There was a great tweet last week sometime, I don't know if I put it in the news or whatever, on this very fact about external discrimination, where somebody had tweeted and Facebook, it put out on social media, apologies if you were in the traffic, and I think it was in Guildford somewhere, I might be wrong. I was the idiot that was flashing his lights and tooting his horn and pushing the way through the traffic. It was a baby boy and I got there on time. You don't know. You don't know.
Yeah.
You've got to kind of allow that's a possibility. And let's face it, when you get angry with other road users, and when you discriminate against other road users, you're the one that suffers, not them.
I think it. Sometimes the road rage bit comes in here as well, doesn't it? When you start thinking about how you feel when somebody cuts you up. And
coming back to the form though, coming back to the form. Well, that would be if the instructor's commenting on externally on other road users. That would be demonstrating a discriminatory manner. So the examiner could, under the wording of that, could legitimately call that one. Now we've got discrimination against the person you're teaching. Fattest, sexist. Sexist is probably one of the biggest ones. I cringe And when I think back, I don't think I was ever laddish, but when I think back to going back to my late teens, very early 20s, even round about the time I started to be a driving instructor, I would sometimes have this kind of man banter or boy banter with other people, and it was just totally inappropriate by today's standards, and probably by those standards then as well. It's just we didn't recognise it, you know. And off the cuff comments like, you know, women or men.
Boy racer.
Let's not get too serious. 99% of the time, if you really know the person you're working with, it isn't going to do any harm. The danger is the 1% of the time when you think you know the person you're working with and you don't. And that's the danger. And you can have a bit of fun and a laugh without being discriminatory, without I think if you think anything that's personal or could be construed as being personal could be construed as being discriminatory, particularly if it's got a negative bent. Yeah,
and it really is throughout the session. So it's not just a one-off, it's at the beginning or the end, it's throughout. So the examiner will be watching for those sorts of things to be said.
It doesn't mean you've got to be starchy. I mean, this is an odd example to use, but I'm just using an example of something that's wacky that doesn't cause a problem. I had somebody that kept coming up too fast to junctions one time. And there was nothing I could do to slow him down. So I said, pull up on the left, get out the car, come on. And I was starting to get out. I turned to the examiner in the back. I said, are you coming with us? So he looked at me, didn't know what the hell was going on. And the examiner stayed in the car. So I'm going down there, I said, come on, you idiot, hurry up. So I'm being quite rude to the learner. And I'm rushing him down the footpath. We're about 20 metres from the junction, the T-junction. And I'm saying, quick, come on. Come on, stupid. And I'm doing this in a loud voice and the examiner could hear me. And then we get to the T-junction. And so I was being quite discriminatory in that respect. Get to the T-junction, I'm quick over the road. And the lad said, stop, you're going to kill us, you twat. His actual words. And we would have done if he'd come out in the road and we would have been run over by a lorry. I said, are you upset? He said, yeah. I said, that's how I feel every time we come up to the bloody junction. You're not taking any notice of me. Got back in the car, did it perfectly. It doesn't quite tie in with discriminatory, that, even though I think the fact I was being rude to him made me think about that. But I'm not saying that driving lessons, and that I got a 6 on that check test then, incidentally, after I persuaded the examiner that it wasn't to stop. We weren't stringing them up.
I also think
you can have a bit of fun, you can use different methods, you can do different things without being discriminatory.
I also think in this sense as well, I mean, today I was driving one of the instructor's cars and it had got obviously sign writing all over it. And I noticed that quite a lot of the time, if I was obeying the speed limit, then the guy behind was trying to overtake, whatever, you know. And sometimes the reaction is, look at the idiot up my backside, or as somebody put it, up my arse, you know. And I think that it
was a baby boy.
I think it's, you know, that the guy behind's trying to push, and so on, and trying to get by. So I think it's
there are two
things to be careful about.
One of the things we rattle on about ad nauseum is route planning and route selection and stuff like that. So, and something else I said the other week, I said I wanted to get one of those big foam fingers to point to myself. When something like that's happening, the first thing I do is point a finger to myself and think, as an instructor, is it something I'm doing? Is this guy behind being an idiot? And I mean an idiot in a factual sense, and driving in an idiotic way.
Yeah.
Is he being an idiot because I've got this learner in the wrong place at the wrong time, you know, and am I contributing to this situation?
Sometimes it doesn't have to be that, John. The L plate is enough, I think, sometimes.
Well, yes, for something. But the thing is, if anybody listening, and I'm sure you're learning if you're a new instructor, if you've not grown a thick skin yet, you better grow one pretty quick. Otherwise, you're going to get very stressed out as a driver.
Okay.
Even if you're doing good route planning and stuff like that. Have we have we sort of covered discriminatory manner there?
I think so, John. The final one, the final one is at the end of the session was the pupil encouraged to reflect on their own performance. It's sort of for me, reflection is very important, and I will do it an awful lot all the way through anyway. So when we arrive back at the test centre, it's a natural occurrence to just say, well, how did we do? Did we achieve your goals? You know,
I would, particularly for learners who don't tend to engage, the sort of question I would start with is, when we're talking about feedback, I didn't go into, and I'm not going to go into now, my rule of positive feedback first. And success-based development. But when it comes to the end, when it comes to encouraging people to reflect, I would start by asking questions like, what did you enjoy most about today's lesson? What do you feel you did best in today's lesson? Or what went really well in today's lesson? And I'd make it a very focused question and a very leading question in a sense, because I'm leading along a specific route. What went well, what was best, what was good about, what did you enjoy about, what did you like about? Because people will engage with that question. They might start to answer, oh, well, I didn't like it. Whoa, stop.
Yeah. How many times?
We'll get to that in a moment. But first of all, and get them thinking and analysing their own performance on what was good. Then you can move on to some. So what was not so good? What can we improve? What can we develop? What can we look forward to next time? And those sort of questions will cause people to reflect and to self-evaluate. Using scaling questions, for example, help people reflect and self-evaluate.
I think that the important bit about this, John, is at the end of the session, was the pupil encouraged to reflect on their own performance rather than the instructor saying, well, yes, that was bloody good.
I thought you did really well today at this. And an interesting thing about that as well is, from a teaching point of view, and this is very, very important, I better get my head around this one. If you start off with that direct feedback at the end, rather than encouraging people to reflect, you did really well at the roundabouts today. The learner might be sitting there thinking, I did crap at the roundabouts today. And now your comment isn't going to be reassuring. Your comment's going to be, it's going to leave the learner thinking, God, I did crap. He thinks I've done well. I know I did bad. I'm all on my own now. You know, he's not going to help me anymore. Shit, I'm not looking forward to next lesson. A bit of compliment. Maybe it's the way my head works. I don't know. But if you ask a question, you know, what went well? What did you do well? How did you do? What could be improved? But you will get the information you need. And again, it was a bit like the scaling. If somebody thinks they're a 5, they're a 5, regardless of what you think they are. If somebody thinks that they've not done well, they've not done well. If somebody thinks they have done well and you know they haven't done well, then you've got to work with them to bring them around to the realisation, to help them to recognise what the scale is or whatever. But all these sort of things, usually, if you're using questions at the end, you'll be encouraging people to reflect. What I was just going to ask, Graham, was I know some instructors, it's not something I used to do, particularly. I have been known to do.
I hope you don't think I did.
Do with ADI training, but some instructors will actually give learners a little pro forma, a little form to take away and a little reflective sheet to write their thoughts on. And learners will engage with that and do it. I don't know if anybody who's on here tonight does that. No?
Yeah, I think so. That there's all sorts of ways of doing it, of course, and then either reflect on the performance and what do you want to do next week, of course, as well as the next lesson, or for the next 30 minutes or the next hour.
It's about taking it to the next step, to the development step.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I 1 or 2 people are saying, Claire, forms and sheets and things, and you can always give them watch, learn, drive videos to look at from about what they're going to do next week and so on.
Now, from where I am, and I'm just looking at the chat box, Graham, from where I am, I've got an arrow saying 74 new messages below it, so I don't think we're going to touch on everything that's in there. But there's some great comments about, for example, closed questions on the move, such as, are you in the correct position for the width of this road? Can prompt people to realise that they're perhaps not. That comes back to the fact that answers needn't always be verbal. You know, if you ask a question about, you know, are you in a good position, somebody can answer you by changing their position. Perfect.
Yeah, but they should also follow up with why is it important to be in the correct position? And,
or if somebody changes position, great change of position, and then, as you say, why is that important? Why did we need to do that?
David says just texting in on online diary feedback. He couldn't give feedback. He was bursting for the loo.
Disco leg. Disco leg. Think about the way you bring the clutch up yourself. Often disco leg it can be because the muscle structure hasn't built up for that clutch. But think about the way the clutch works. The way the clutch works is you don't push your heel into the floor, but you rest your heel on the floor, and the clutch, your foot slides back and then lifts up. And what often happens with disco leg is now, let me just explain for those on Facebook who haven't got this. It's about learners with that trembling leg. I call it disco legs to make them laugh out loud. Fucking wish mine wouldn't. No, we're not supposed to stop here. I'm only reading what's there. Slide and lift. What a lot of learners do, particularly in the early stage, and if you're not watching them do, they go to lift straight away with the clutch. And if they go lift straight away, they'll often get that. So try slide and lift.
Yeah, I think that comment came in, John, when I was talking about the lady that was got clutch shake and things.
Yeah, I'm way back. I'm just quickly going.
Yeah. I think that text came in. The question came in about the lady who was nervous on her second part 2 and having reversed into the crash barrier on her first part 2.
I was thinking, if they've got that problem, change your car, get a VW Beetle, because the pedal's completely different for the clutch.
Start teaching them automatic.
Which Beetle are the old one or the new one?
I don't know about the new one, not being one of
the
those.
old one used to come out before, didn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
I'm scanning very quickly through these. I'm not going to be answering.
I'll give you some scanning, John. Did you see my comment about the discrimination?
Yeah, terrible.
When I was 17 taking my driving lessons, can you imagine I could have been a bit of a DICK at times? And my instructor...
No, really?
Nothing's changed.
Really? Me, yeah. I know. And my instructor called me a big girl's blouse, and I can't remember what for, but I just had one of those days. And not long after, I know where it was. We were on Brookhill Lane, if people know Pinkston, into Sutton in Ashfield. And later on, I'm in Sutton in Ashfield on Outram Street. Busy high street, cars parked on both sides, oncoming traffic, and I thought, sod it, let's see what he does. And you needed to put butter and marge up down the side of the car so you can slip through it. And I just tried to peg it down there. He jeweled me. I looked at him and I went, "Who's the effing big girl's blouse now?" And I didn't take many lessons after. I think that was my last one, actually.
And what did he say?
He wasn't happy. It was quite a quiet experience. It's strange, really, because I can look back and think of so many different incidents I had on my lessons. Yeah. And another one from discrimination on the other side of the fence. Wasn't that long ago. I was in my French car driving in England, junction 28, the M1, coming on, going southbound towards Nottingham, and the hard shoulder's all coned off. There's a lot of traffic. It's dark. It was winter. And so I remember left-hand drive car, and I'm trying to pull on into the first lane, and there's lots of traffic, and I'm actually struggling to get on. And my passenger, I won't say who the passenger was, but my passenger was going through a lot of mental problems at that time, a lot of stress. And they wound the window down, and they were leaning out the window, effing and jeffing at somebody, and because it was difficult for me to get on. So I had one hand on the steering wheel and I had the other hand on the passenger, trying to drag them back in because I couldn't pull over onto the hard shoulder. There were cars in front of me, there were cars behind me, and of course the cars behind me can see, and next to me can see kind of this person leaning out the window, giving two fingers and what have you not. So I'm getting horned and flashed and everything like that, but they didn't understand the situation.
I have a little story to tell about client-centered learning. My driving instructor, all of a few years ago, 50 years ago, December the 17th, 1967, I had 10 lessons, and if I had some brilliant client-centered learning. I don't think he ever knew my name. I was just punished. I got flicked on the ear, horse bite, pinched on the back of the hand. So if I was doing something right, I wasn't being punished. If I did something wrong, I just got punished. So I had to work out for myself what was good and what was bad. Discrimination all over again. Yeah. Don't try it at home, please. Yeah.
I think though, when it happened to me,
You're frozen, David.
Nice, isn't it?
It couldn't happen to a nicer bloke, could it?
That was really good.
Yeah. Just sitting there.
Yeah. Just a couple of quick things to finish. Yes, Claire, I'm aware that I'm lost in the comments sometimes, but I am relating them back to wherever. I was just following up with some comments on various bits and pieces. And in fact, just a comment, Claire, you made a little while ago about homework, and we were talking about reflecting and notes to reflect and sort of take home and think about. I think about homework. Often instructors tell me that people won't do homework, and I think if they're not doing homework, it's because you're not making it relevant enough, and you're not. Unless mum and dad's paying for the lessons, you're not emphasising the cost enough. Because I would sit with my learners and say, well, look, if you just looked at those couple of things, we wouldn't have had to spend 10 minutes doing this. We could have been driving, and make them take some responsibility. Make them, how client-centered is that? Take some responsibility for their own learning. But come to agreements with them. We're going to be doing this next week. What would be useful? How much time have you got? First of all, how much time have you got? What do you think you could learn at home? What would be useful? Have a look on John's Driver Active site, or look in a book, or look on the web, look on YouTube. When are you going to do it? Okay, if you can't do it Wednesday evening, what's your fallback time that you're going to do it? So rather than just saying, do this before next lesson, if you do that, they ain't going to do it. I guarantee it. So you've got to create a little contract with them, really, and let them recognise the value, the monetary value, and the learning value of doing a little bit for themselves between lessons.
Hey, John, you remember when?
Now you're freezing a lot, David. We've lost you again.
I was just going to make the comment, John, that that they pay you for an hour's lesson, because that's all instructors can sell is time, if you like, or valuable time in the car, and that valuable time is a reflective time. So don't hesitate to stop the lesson a few minutes early, 4 or 5 minutes early, and go into the reflection and so on, because it's really, really valuable.
There is a point on that. Way back, this is going to be my last story of this series, but way back I was at Chichester Test Centre, and guy in there said, "Is you're going to pass?" I said, "Yeah, of course she's going to pass. At least I'm expecting her to." He said, "Oh, it's not a first test then." I said, "What?" He said, "Oh, you shouldn't have them passing the first time. You want to have them for a few more lessons." And he'd be the sort of guy that would never encourage any homework because it might make them learn a bit quicker. But my experience was the quicker they learned, the more business they brought my way. And the more variety it brought into my car, because I didn't have the same person for 12 months. I had a good turnover of customers and higher pricing because I was in demand. Incidentally, one of his learners a couple of weeks later hit the wall coming back in.
Yeah, my next door neighbour was told that nobody passes first time, and we got to Christmas time. Test was in Coventry, and it was cancelled just before Christmas. And the first one she could get was in Rugby, which is 20 miles down the road, on December the 28th, I think it was. So we shot over, spent about half an hour driving around Rugby, doing one or two things that she might not have come across. and she passed the test first time with 4 faults over in rugby. She was dead chuffed, and spent the next 40 minutes while we were driving home effing and blinding at all of her mates, saying, I told you I'd effing pass first time. Yeah, you said I wouldn't pass effing first time. And it was quite an amusing incident. It sticks out in my mind a lot.
Everybody, I'm going to chuck you back at David in a second. Hope he doesn't freeze up too much. But thank you for all coming along this evening. Thank you for those who've been along to more than one of these webinars, to the whole lot of them. I hope that some of what we've offered has been valuable and useful, and I hope that you've actually taken it and played with it in the car. And I deliberately use the term "played with it" to see what you can make work for yourself, how you can bastardize it, how you can take my idea and realize that it doesn't work all for you, but you've discovered something else as a result. You know, whatever. If I can help you to think out, I know you said make again, but if I can help you to think about things, well, for me, I'm enjoying what I'm doing, and I'm achieving what I set out to do. So thanks to everybody. Graham.
Yeah, I'm sure that, absolutely big thank you to listening to a couple of old codgers here talking themselves quite one old codger and one slightly younger codger, but still nevertheless a couple of old codgers. We'll probably be doing lots more webinars in the new year, won't we, John, on different subjects.
I think we'll be revisiting standards check, something like this in the spring, but we'll be doing some other stuff, taking some of my masterclass thoughts and topics and ideas, and just sort of randomly, some of them, I think.
Okay, and to talk, just to answer Elaine here, I think it was Elaine that says I'll be in the Caribbean. Yeah, Elaine, you've seen the weather over in the Caribbean? Sorry, I enjoy your holiday in the Caribbean. I'm jealous. Yeah. Okay. And Claire said,
I'm going. I want to stay on a bit longer. I'm looking at some of these feedback comments now. Just keep boosting my ego.
Elaine, why will you be missing the webinars? You can, I'm sure you can log on from the Caribbean somewhere. There's bound to be an internet cafe or something anyway.
Yeah, and just if you're not already a member of ADI Masterclass, just get a dose of me every week by signing up. For 40 quid,
you won't get a dose of me every week, so you don't have to fret over things like that. But thank you very much for listening. Remember, this isn't something you have to do just because the standard check is coming up. Introduce bits of it each time you go out, and you'll soon find that it becomes the norm.
David will tell you it's all about the money.
Learning. Sorry? David
will tell us it's all about the money.
Yeah, it's all about the money. Money. That was Jessie J, wasn't it? Yeah.
I'm supposed to be the young one.
Huh? Yeah.
But just on that note, what did I see this week? It was my birthday on Monday, and somebody sent me something that said,
Sergeant Pepper's.
If you're young and you think young, then you're young. If you're old and you think young, then you're a delusional old fart.
Yeah, okay. Finally, a couple of things to mention is the AD&D that David, I think they sponsored all of this, didn't they, David? And the Zoom meetings and things. He looks like he's still frozen.
Yeah, the AD&D sponsored the software and stuff for David. The whole series has been, as a reminder at the end of these things, I want you to remember, this is very, very important. John Farnham is commercial. John Farnham is a working class man who has to make a bloody living. And I give more away for free than anybody else I know, but for a purpose. And this is a way to do your business as well. You know, be generous. And the purpose of this is we want to promote the business summit, David's business summit in January. So find out more about that. You won't find John on Facebook, and I haven't posted anything on my Twitter account. I'm just looking at Claire there. Claire, go to adimasterclass.co.uk and there'll be a box you can contact me on there. ADR
or through smart driving.
Or just email john@smartdriving.co.uk. That's another way to get to us. Or just Google me and I'll come up somewhere. You're bound to find me somewhere.
Okay. David said, any chance of the £20 deal for your videos? If you look after your CPD certificates and a £20 deal, and since Adam's not here, it's adam.bragg, BRAGG @smartdriving.co.uk, and tell him that John said, yeah, to email him, not me. So yes, we'll do the £20 deal for the videos. What day is it? Thursday, till tomorrow evening. Yeah.
Is it £20? Was it half price? Have you just made a mistake?
Elaine, happy birthday whenever, tomorrow. Oh, next Tuesday. Okay, happy birthday. John, our birthday is 4th and 5th of December. The examiners are on strike. Yeah. Only some of them, I believe. I think that's about it, isn't it? AD&D and the Business Summit in January. Google the Business Summit. Are you frozen again, David? Wave to me if you can. If you're not frozen. He's moving his head.
He is moving.
Yeah. Do you want to come in, David? You can unmute yourself now. What does that mean?
Hey, how you doing?
Yeah, okay. You kept free.
Mate.
Good, thank you. Thank you very, very, very much. My internet connection has been absolutely abysmal. But hey ho, there we go. A few people asked.
Okay, he's gone. Couldn't happen to a nicer man, could it? Right, Claire, it's John Farlam, Farlam, not Farnham. Farlam, Farlam.
David's posted it in the chat box. Right, I'm going to, on behalf of David, I'm going to close the webinar. Well, I won't close it. David will close it officially in a minute, but I'm going to shut off my video and sound, everybody. Thanks very, very much for coming. Loved it.
Have a great Christmas and a festive break, and let's have a very successful and joyous New Year, eh?
And there is one more Smart Driving Business Seminar, webinar, I think on the 12th. I think it's the 12th of December, but I'll flag it in my news to members. So that's a closed one, a private.
Yeah, I'm back if you can hear me. I think it'd be easy if I was on Mars. You get a better signal. Thanks for everything that you've done, AD.
And on that note of professionalism, good night.
Good night, everybody. Yeah, I'll see if I can contact David after the seminar. So have a great Christmas, everybody, and bye-bye.